a huge Tiger fan, and I thought it was just so perfect that while we were waiting in line for the merchandise tent, I was able to watch from a distance Tiger hit balls on the range. I wasn't able to see the ball flight. I had kind of a side-on view, but we'll get to this a little bit more later on. Yes, I wanted to see Tiger, but my number one goal on the day wasn't to see Tiger, it was to see the golf course. Hey there, welcome to episode 7 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Robillard. And if you're watching on video, you can guess the theme of this podcast. And for those of you that are listening, I'm wearing a Masters hat with a Masters t-shirt. I've got a Masters flag over my left-hand shoulder. We're definitely late to the party, but that's because I decided to start my podcast in the month of July. My dad and I were super fortunate to go to the Masters this year, 2023 Masters. So I'm going to do a Masters recap show. I made a point of trying to make some notes on our way home from the trip because I wanted to maybe be able to share that story one day, and I've decided to do it here. So this is not a normal episode, but I think it's going to be a fun one. For those of you that have been to the Masters before, it might maybe help you reminisce of the time that you went, and for those that haven't been, I apologize. My goal is not to make you jealous, but if you do get the chance to go someday, maybe a little bit of guidance on what to do on a couple of key things. So we were fortunate to have tickets to the Tuesday practice round this year, and also very fortunate that the weather was very, very nice. I obviously haven't been on a tournament day, but I do feel that if I had the choice on the first day, I'd probably want to go to a practice round instead of a tournament day. I guess you get to bring in the camera. You can't bring in a cell phone. You can bring in a digital camera. You can take some pictures. And I think, especially since I was able to go with my dad, to just get some pictures of my dad and I that we'll be able to cherish forever. That's something you can't do on a tournament day. And I think that, on top of maybe some other things I'll talk about, the ability to just be able to capture a couple of pictures with my dad is something that I'll never forget. And I think that's why maybe one of the main reasons why I enjoyed a practice round day. So a lot of things you hear people talk about. The town of Augusta is very small and hotel rooms are extremely expensive. So we'd actually stayed in Columbia, South Carolina, which was an hour drive away. And on the Tuesday morning, we got up at 5:30 a.m. We were in the truck on the road at about 6 o'clock, and we had about an hour drive. We showed up at around 7 a.m. I have to say that the parking and the flow of parking was all very, 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 very good. I don't think you can ever get there early enough, because the thing that's convenient, and I'll touch about it later on, the earlier you get there, the closer you are parked to the gate and the gates to get in. So I think that is very important. They have a radio station that gives you traffic updates and different things like that. It was very well laid out. So parking and getting there very easy. But I would recommend get there as early as you can. So my dad and I had decided, and this is a topic that a lot of people have, is when you go to the merchandise tent. Do you go to the merchandise tent? Yes, I went to the merchandise tent. As you can tell if you see me on video, I got all kinds of stuff here. I spent way too much money, but that's besides the point. We had decided that we wanted to go to merchandise tent the very first thing, because I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your badge, at least ours on Tuesday, it had one re-entry. So going back to why you want to park close, what we decided to do was we would get there early, get the merchandise done, drop the merchandise off back in the truck, and then we were off to the day. We felt the parking lot was very secure and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we ended up doing. So the merchandise line was massive. The thing that was actually kind of cool, though, is just the way that the merchandise line worked its way around. If you were at the back of the line, you were actually facing, or you could see very clearly, the putting green and the driving range. So we decide that we get there, we see the line, we're in line for the merchandise tent, and once you know it, I look to the left, and maybe, let's say, maybe 80 to 100 yards away. Who's on the driving range? my idol, Tiger. I'm a huge Tiger fan, and I thought it was just so perfect that while we were waiting in line for the merchandise tent, I was able to watch from a distance Tiger hit balls on the range. I wasn't able to see the ball flight. I had kind of a side-on view, but we'll get to this a little bit more later on. Yes, I wanted to see Tiger, but my number one goal on the day wasn't to see Tiger, it was to see the golf course. So being able to see him on the driving range, I thought was very cool. And then able to get to see people on the putting green and different things. So I think we waited in line for probably about an hour. The line continued to move pretty quick. But once you get in, it's like the busiest place you've ever seen. I joke with friends, there's this Christmas movie called Jingle All the Way where there's a scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger busts through the door and the guy at the door gets trampled. And that's how I feel how busy this place is. Like everyone is in there. It is absolute chaos. Like it feels like it's the size of like a Home Depot. Like it's not that big, but it sure as hell feels like it's that big when you get in there. And there's people moving everywhere. And as you're going through this, like it's actually kind of quite overwhelming because the thing I also didn't realize is they sell everything, every knickknack, every possible item. There's these gnomes that people talk about that are collectibles. They were selling their brand new video game for PlayStation 5, like all the clothing. They sell everything. So what I did in advance in hopes of trying to keep myself from spending too much money is I'd actually made a list. And I figured personally I wanted to get not a lot, but I wanted to get some clothes and some gear that I could wear. So that's what I did. So we went through and we kind of wandered our way through this maze. You're running into people. You're saying, I'm sorry 1,000 times. But all in all, the cool thing about it though was the environment, everybody there, although very overwhelmed and rushed, you were at the Masters and the environment was everyone was so excited. So we worked our way through. We did our shopping. I told myself I really hoped I did not spend more than $1,000 US. I spent just about 900, so I wasn't over budget. But a thing, and I'll touch on that for a second. I told myself I'm probably never going to go back. And if I look back in 5 years or 10 years from now, and if I didn't buy the gear, the couple pullovers I got, the flag, different things like that, I'm probably going to look back at myself and say like, 10 years from now, what's a couple $100? So that's why I decided to get the swag that I did. And I'm happy that I got it. So we'll leave the merchandise tent and then we decide, okay, it's 8:30 a.m. My dad stayed right outside the merchandise area. I hightailed it back to the parking lot with my dad's keys. I threw it in the truck. I locked the truck and I go back in and I find my dad right where he said he was going to be. And it was 9 a.m. I had already seen Tiger. We had already been through the merchandise area. We're thinking, let's get on the golf course. So when you walk in, like kind of once you first get through where the merchandise tent is and the food and all that kind of stuff, you kind of enter where the golf course opens up or where it kind of appears actually right by the middle or right by the first hole. And there's a scoreboard on the left and it's very old school in style because there's no cell phones, right? So there's no way to really get much information. And they said which groups are on which nines or who had teed off and different things like that. And it was probably, I think it was like 8:40 that Tiger had teed off on hole number 1 with a couple other players. And I looked at my dad and I said, Tiger teeing off on the front 9 is perfect. I said, let's go to the back 9. So we hang around the putting green a little bit. One thing that's actually that you don't realize, like number 1 and the putting green and number 10 tee are all really close. Like they're way closer than it seems like it would be on TV. So we walk over to number 10 and there's no disrespect to this player, but Seamus Powers is teeing off on the 10th tee by himself. And I looked at my dad and I said, that's our guy. So we followed Seamus Powers down number 10. Actually, we followed him basically from 10 through 13. There was nobody following him. We were basically there by ourselves. We were holding on to the rope. We were so close. The tee shot on 10, the downhill, oh my God. Like it's very hard to explain, so I won't try to explain it, but 10 was beautiful. 11 was beautiful. That green, that second shot from that distance is absolutely incredible to see in person. we got to hole number 12. Like we were literally sitting 3 feet behind him in that front row of chairs watching Seamus Powers hit his tee shot number 12. So we had an absolutely perfect front row view of holes 10 through 13. So then after the 13th hole, there was a concession stand there, so we decided to stop for breakfast. Hey, I've just got a quick favor to ask, and I'll get you back to the episode. If you're enjoying these episodes, I need you to do me a favor. Can you please like, subscribe, and give me a positive review? Whether you're listening podcast, YouTube, wherever you're listening, your support in form of a subscription or review really helps the podcast grow and also means a lot to me. So if you're enjoying this, make sure you let me know by subscribing or leaving a review, and I'll keep making more great content. Now back to the episode. And so many people talk about the food, right? The food is so cheap. The food is so delicious. It's so reasonable. I don't remember the exact prices, but I remember like my dad and I we each got a breakfast sandwich. We'd each gotten a cookie. We'd each gotten a lemonade. And like, I swear it was $12. You can find the prices online, but it's so reasonably priced, which I think is something that is I think it's a nice touch. I know you hear a lot of events where they charge $16 for a beer or whatever these outrageous prices are. They do not do that at the Masters. And I think that is one of the very, very, very cool things. So we got breakfast. Breakfast sandwich was A1. The lemonade was A1. So then we decide to continue along the back nine. By this point, it was getting closer to lunchtime. And as we got to 15, as we started walking down 15, we started looking around on the golf course. You could tell the golf course was a lot busier. There was a lot of people on the property now, and it was starting to get pretty full. So we get to 16, and 16, everyone's skipping balls in the water. And we actually got very lucky where we got to see Scotty Scheffler skip it across the water. He hit a fantastic shot. Actually, the one thing I'll go back to, because I'm just looking at my notes here, the 15th green, that's par 5, second shot, water short, water long. That green is so shallow. It looks like you got like 4 feet to land on. It is so shallow from front to back. It really blew my mind. And the like the 13th green and the mounds and the mounding and the terrain there is so incredible. Like, I understand why the people that play there for a long time always talk about you got to know the golf course, and why first-time players struggle so much is because understanding that property and all the intricacies and all the different things like that is actually, I think that takes years to understand. So I guess just a really big appreciation for the golf course, seeing in person. Like, I know I'm going to keep saying it's hard to explain. It's very hard to explain how up and down it is, how undulating, how perfect, how beautiful it is. It was all absolutely fantastic. So after we go and we sat on the hill on 16 for a little bit, we walked up 17, 18. 18, like that tee shot is a hallway. And it's funny, having watched Jon Rahm hit that pull on 18, it looked like it was a million miles offline. Like, all of us could very easily pull it where Jon Rahm pulled it, because that's how narrow it was. So we walked 18th hole, and we went up, and we'd been out there for a while, so we decided to get our bite to eat up at the top. Pulled pork sandwich. Oh, the pulled pork sandwiches are so damn good. Then we hung around the putting green for a little bit, and we saw JT in full grind mode. He was doing his speed drills. He was working on start line. He had a full grind mode going. We saw Scotty Scheffler at that point. He had finished. He was up on the putting green working on his putting as well, and it was cool to see. It was Tuesday of the Masters. There's people everywhere. Those guys are in their own zone, and they're working, because for them, obviously, it's one of the biggest events that they can play in. So afterwards, we decide, okay, we've had some lunch. We've hung around for a little bit. Let's start walking the front nine. I think at the time, it was Vijay Singh that was teeing off. We said, and a couple other guys, we said, let's just start walking and let's see how far we get until we run into a big group. Well, we were walking up, and sure enough, we get to the 4th hole. And we have Roy McIlroy, Brooks Koepka, and the amateur who hits it a mile, Gordon Sargent. So that's where we decided to follow. So we decided to follow that group. And I think one thing that maybe I took away from it was, if you want to get close to the players at one point or other, you've got to kind of hop ahead to their next hole. So what we decided to do is we would watch their tee shots. We would watch their second shots into the green. And then after, what we do is we would walk up to the next tee because we wanted to see them hit their tee shots. And specifically, I wanted to see them hit their tee shots on hole number 5, which is that very challenging par 4, the 2 huge bunkers on the left. Something I'll say about the bunkers is the thing that the camera does no justice for is how deep the bunkers are. They are incredibly deep. Like, it feels like every bunker on that property is 6 feet deep, and getting out of them is damn near impossible. And when guys say that they've hit into it and it's a layup, that's because the lip on that thing is 6 feet above their head. So we watch him hit their tee shots, and it was actually crazy to see, like, Brooks hits it a long way, obviously. Rory hits it farther than Brooks, and there's no denying it. And, like, when Rory hits it and this Gordon Sargent kid hits it, Sargent hits it past him. Like, it was incredible, absolutely incredible to see. So we got to walk the front 9 following that group. And then by the time we finish all 18 holes, I think by that point, I don't know, it might have been 2:30 or so, something like that. We'd already been out there a good amount, so we decided to go to the driving range, and we sat on the driving range for maybe about an hour or so, and we watched some people chip and putt afterwards. And then after that, we decided to make our way. And the thing that was really cool about the overall experience, and I said this before, is that, like, everybody who's there, it's their best day ever. You can't have cell phones, and the environment is just so positive, exciting. Everyone's a kid in a candy store, and that's really an experience I'd never felt before. And that was just something that I really, as I'm talking about now, it's kind of bringing it back to me. Just that environment of everyone around there was such a cool thing. And I think with cell phones being at every other event, I don't think there's another event on earth, sporting event on earth, that can replicate the Masters with no cell phones and just that environment. So just, I guess now just kind of do some rapid fire observations. I don't want to keep you here all day. I appreciate you listening enough as it is. The terrain is incredible. The cameras will never do it justice. The elevation changes are massive. The green complexes are incredible. The shapes, the slopes. Like, I just think of, like, the 9th green from back to front. That slope is so severe. The bunkers are so deep. The one hole, a lot of people ask me this, like, what's the one hole that kind of blew your mind? For me, it was the 8th hole, which is that par 5 that has a blind second shot. Like, when you're standing back on that tee, I swear it feels like you're walking down like 70 feet. And that second shot is so up the hill, and you can see literally nothing. They're just aiming at a mound or at a portion of a mound, and they're hitting it. Just the elevation change on the 8th hole, to me, was the craziest one on that golf course. And also, maybe the next time you watch the Masters, the mounds on the left-hand side of that green are so big, and the runoff areas are so severe, that it was actually the 8th hole that I think was probably the most surprising hole for me of the entire property. The course conditions were incredible. I can't believe the amount of volunteers that they have. It was absolutely fantastic. Everything was so nice, was so clean, was so perfect. It was fantastic. And a lot of people have asked me if I were to go back again, if I was ever lucky enough to go back again, what would I do differently? And I don't think I would do a whole lot differently. If it was a practice round, now that I've already been, I'd maybe bring a better quality camera, and I'd follow Tiger. if it was a tournament round, and I'm sure a tournament round is a completely different beast, and you got to find your hole for the day. Depending how early I get there, I'd want to see how sweet of a spot I could get an amen corner, and hang out there. I feel like I've covered a lot. I'm just kind of looking through here at some of the notes that I had made, and some different things to talk about. But I guess I think I'm going to leave it there. I know I've covered a lot. And more than anything, I hope for some of you, I hope that if you've been to the Masters, maybe this will help kind of reignite some experiences you had. If you haven't been, maybe this is your reminder to make sure that you get in the draw to try to get in the Masters. But not all episodes are going to be like this. But my dad and I were just so fortunate. Best day of both of our lives to us to be able to go to the Masters together, that I just wanted to share that while it was still relatively fresh in my mind. So I can go back and rewatch this episode next year at the Masters as I watch it on TV. And see if there's anything that I missed. So thank you for watching. This is episode 7 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. We'll be back to learning stuff on the next episode. Happy golfing.